Today I'm going to talk to you guys about the price mechanism. And really I want to give you just a little further depth because I know we've studied this already. I want to start off with this, with like a brief history lesson, just so you can kind of understand where economic thought has come and really where it began. This guy Adam Smith, he's a Scottish economist, amongst other things, and he was writing in the late 1700s, and he was observing that this new form of commerce, this new thing was happening. Remember, prior to that time, and still at that time, agriculture was the dominant activity that everyone did. Most people were farmers. There was very little manufacturing or services or anything like that. Certainly there was some, but it was really an emerging form of making a living. What he was looking at as he was observing these forms of market capitalism that were emerging in Western Europe, especially in England and Scotland, I suppose, probably more England than Scotland. But what he was noticing was that there was this force that was making everything work together that you couldn't really see, and he called it the invisible hand. And the idea of the invisible hand that we're going to talk about here is that it's selfish motive. And we don't mean selfish in a pejorative term where it's like, well, you're being selfish and you should share. Instead, we mean that if all things are equal, people are most likely to think about what's best for them first. Again, we can think of examples where that might not be true, but at the same time, we can kind of question that. Did I give money to that person? Did I, support that charity because it made me feel good? Well, in that case, we can see that more as an economic exchange where I'm buying a little bit of, feeling good, as opposed to something being truly altruistic. I realize that's a bit cynical, and I'm not sure that's exactly what Adam Smith was going at, but we do have to realize that, when I come to work, when I choose what I'm going to do in a day, I'm looking at it always through, my own personal lens. How does it affect me? What do I think is best? All that. Well, again, instead of seeing that as a negative thing, we need to see it as a positive thing. And if we understand that that is how people work, that people do decide what is best for them and then act on that, well, we can see a little bit more how the price mechanism works. Because what will happen is that all these this intrinsic motive, or this motive to do what's best for you, it's going to have to coordinate somewhere. At some point, what's good for you is also what's good for me. And that's really where price is going to come from. So we can break this down into two other thoughts. We can look at price being a signal. And we see this kind of here on this arrow that I've called A. So let's say that we've got P1. And at P1, if we go over to the supply curve, we see that suppliers, they're not that motivated to make the product because the price isn't high enough. At the same time, demanders are willing to buy or willing to demand a large amount because, again, that's what's in their self-interest or their best interest. So let's put some numbers here and say that quantity supplied is 45 and quantity demanded is 100. So obviously we're going to have a surplus of 55. Essentially what's going on here at point A, or at P1, is the consumers, see they've got a C for a head and the suppliers have an S for a head. I know I'm pretty stunning as an artist. The consumers are essentially saying to the suppliers, we want more of this product. And it's how they communicate. Instead of writing emails or anything like that, what we'll see is that because there's this surplus and there'll be some competition amongst buyers, so the price will start to climb. So again, they anticipated a price of five rand, but instead the price starts to go up and up and up. That's a signal. That's the consumer saying, we are willing to pay a higher price for this good if you will make more. So these guys hear that and they go, okay, so that's going to be something that they're going to do. Okay? Again, we can link this to buyer desire, right? We're saying that they desire the product all the way over here at 100, and they desire it so much that they're willing to give up more of their money to get it. Okay, second thing we can see about price is that it's an incentive. We haven't really talked about these two terms yet, and we should have. An incentive is simply something that encourages you to do a good thing. So when your parents say, well, you know, every time you get good grades, we'll give you X amount of money, that's an incentive. A disincentive is something that discourages you from doing a bad thing. So if your parents say, every time you get a bad grade, we're going to make you pay us, that would be a disincentive. Or if you get bad grades, we're going to ground you, or whatever it might be. Both of those are, both incentives and disincentives are geared at or aimed at getting the result you want. It's just two methods of going about it. So again, like a speeding ticket, that's a disincentive. The desired result is we want people to slow down, we want people to drive safely. So we're going to fine you if you don't drive safely. An incentive in that same vein would be I usually get, you know, you get a break on your car insurance, you don't have to pay such a high price if you don't have any speeding tickets or accidents. So that's an incentive to drive more safely. When we look at, let's look at this one first, let's look at surplus that we have here. Scarcity that we have here. As the price goes up, there's an incentive to the suppliers. Because they're getting more money, the higher price incentivizes them to sell their good, or to produce more of the goods. Remember, they get to sell all the goods at a higher price. This is kind of where we look into our crystal ball. So not just the 45 they originally made, but now it's saying, well, if we make 50, we get to sell all 50 of those at some higher price. So that incentivizes them to make more. However, it works as a disincentive to the demanders, right? The consumers are going, well, gosh, we were going to get them for 5, but now if we're going to buy them, we have to pay a higher price, so we don't want them as much. So again, it helps to explain this behavior of moving up the demand curve. That incentive for the suppliers, which makes them, this is arrow B. That incentive to the suppliers makes them produce more, and the disincentive makes the demanders demand less, and we see that this is where the coordination begins to occur. It's the invisible hand because nobody is having to do anything. If there were an invisible hand, it would have some effect. It would push people or, you know, I don't know, like tap people on the head and run away real quickly. I don't know. The point is there would be some action, and it wouldn't be something that would be seen. You would see the result, but not the actual cause. So again, here, it's people doing what is best or is in their own best interest, starting to come together and coordinate, that is going to eventually lead us to equilibrium price. We see the same thing here if we have a surplus, a price above equilibrium. You're going to see the same effect, that you're going to have surplus, the price will fall, and that's going to incentivize demanders to buy more, and it's going to disincentivize suppliers, and they'll supply less. At the same time, there's still a bit of signaling. Now the signalers are kind of the suppliers. They're saying, hey, we need you to buy more. Will you buy more if we lower the price? So that's the signal to consumers to buy more of the good. At the same time, as the price is lowered, you could say that those consumers, as they buy more, are signaling the suppliers to continue lowering price, to sell off their goods. Imagine if they lowered their price and nobody bought it. Well, now the signal is, we don't want your good no matter what. Okay, it's important to remember that when we look at our equilibrium diagram, if we start here at equilibrium, well, everything's all good. But if there's then a subsequent change in demand or supply, I've shown an increase in demand here, but it could have been a decrease of demand or an increase or decrease of supply. Once you've shown that increase, the old equilibrium is really just a figment of your imagination. Since I've got a whiteboard, it's easy for me. I'm just going to call this now P1. And instead of calling this Q star, which implies that it's an equilibrium point, let's see what we're pointing at now. Well, remember, when we look at the old demand curve, or once there's been a demand shift, what happens to D1? it's essentially not there anymore. It doesn't matter. It's only a figment of your imagination. So if that's true, if this isn't really here, well then P1 isn't pointing at D1 anymore because it's gone. So P1 is only pointing at the supply curve, and let's look down and call this QS, okay? And then we're going to take P1 across and bring this down, and this is going to be QD. So now at this point, we can identify at the old price, we have a situation like what we saw on the previous whiteboard. So we have a situation where quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. That means we have scarcity. So that's, again, the exact same thing. It doesn't matter that it used to be equilibrium. All that matters now is at this price, there is scarcity. So again, we're going to see a signal. We're willing to pay a higher price. That's going to incentivize suppliers, and the market is going to work its way back towards this new equilibrium. And that's how we see our price mechanism work. And again, Adam Smith would explain that this is the invisible hand coordinating everything so that resources are allocated in the way that is most agreeable. Is it best? Well, again, we see that quantity, we see that some resources are now being devoted, to this new product. Maybe that's not best. Maybe you don't think it's best, but the market does. Everyone who's involved here has said, this is what we can both agree on. And that's the importance of a market system, is that we see these two groups that aren't really in agreement with each other come together and figure out a way, without really sitting down and figuring out a way, they come to a place where they're both as happy as they can be.